Hey guys, Dwayne here. Today I want to talk a little bit about how things change with how it pertains to our kids. I think I've told this story before, but because of what happened, but basically today, I think it's relevant and worth re-engaging on. And that is at the beginning of this whole thing, 5.5 years ago. Things were really tense between me and my kids. I've had that happen through this entire process with all of my children, but the first one that was really triangulated against and really actively pursued, for lack of a better word, was my son. And that started out with him having an estranged relationship with me, or at least that's the way it was being portrayed through therapy and stuff like that. And obviously that made my relationship with him a little more complicated and a little more tense. And back in the early days, my methodology and understanding was flawed, and I didn't know what I was dealing with. So it complicated what I was doing, and I made a lot of mistakes, which didn't necessarily help. And I've talked about that in past videos. But I've always had a methodical approach to these sort of things. And I'm a very logical, systematic person. And, I can lay out things that make sense. And when this whole thing started, and I think when I mentioned it to you guys before, what happened is they wanted to actually put my son on some medication. I couldn't get the therapist or the psychologist, to talk to me. So I made an appointment, went down there and had, basically an hour-long conversation with this guy where he proceeded to tell me, that, basically validating a lot of the smear campaign things that the ex was trying to instill in him. So after that, some things obviously changed, and I recommended that maybe his mom bringing him to every therapy appointment might not be such a good idea, because it appears that his attitude changes depending on whatever environment he's at. So, all right. So to move this story on, so that's a little bit of the background. One of the things that the psychologist and the therapist, because he had both, recommended is that I spend some more quality time with my son, just one-on-one time. And I had early on, at that stage in the game, I was still actually communicating via email, text, and sometimes on the phone. But at this point, I think the phone had pretty much stopped. And I had mentioned to, tried to send a note saying, hey, would like to spend some one-on-one time with our son. Can we do a thing where I was open to it. I'm like, look, so I can see him on, one of your weekend days, and then you can see him on one of my weekend days. Or if you want to do something special with any of the kids, let's cooperate and do this. And the answer that came back was, oh, that's great. You can do whatever you should do that on your weekend with the kids. And it's like, it's early on, so I didn't really do babysitters and stuff like that. And they were younger, right? So it wasn't like, you could just leave them alone. And that started this long, ongoing thing where there just wasn't any cooperation, right? And the kids wouldn't ask, as far as I could tell, the kids wouldn't ask about doing anything when it was with me, or if something came up, then something better would come up. All right. And I've mentioned stories about that with my youngest and some of the after school programs during the summer where they would go to cool trips and stuff. And I was paying for the whole thing. And I there was one year where she didn't get to go to any of them. And, the one time that I did ask, because my daughter had said she wanted to go, and that didn't even have anything to do with being with me. The answer was no. I mean, pretty much anything that had anything to do with me was no. And what happened is so that set the stage that the answer was no, so the kids wouldn't even go there, right? So there's been a lot of different things that have happened, and a lot of opportunities to do things that just, didn't happen. And it got to the point that I wouldn't even ask, because it just wasn't worth it, because the answer, it would always turn into a problem. I think a couple of years ago, I did try to do something for Thanksgiving. And, my kids actually threw me under the bus, because, one of them said they really wanted to go. The youngest said she really wanted to go. The middle one was like, well, maybe. And the oldest was like, well, I'll go. Right. So I asked, I'm like, okay, you guys are saying it out there, so I'm going to try to communicate with your mom and ask. And I threw it out there. And then the next thing I get back, and it's really interesting how this plays out, because the message that came back was, well, I'm not going to force my kids to do something they don't want to do, and they don't want to go. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Right. I mean, and I get it. I mean, I understand why they say what they say, because they don't, they're feeling the emotional pressure to say no, that they don't really want to do it. So the only one that did want to do it was the youngest. And then what happened with that, and I know I've told this story before, is the ex was like, oh yeah, great, that's awesome, but the time frame was so short that it was not even worth, we couldn't even really go. I mean, so I ultimately, I think what I did on that one is I called my daughter and I'm like, well, I'm sorry, you can't, we can't go, really wanted you to go, but I mean, you guys must have something really special planned, so that's great, so I hope you really have fun. And it was like, no, so anyways, so this brings us up to today, or this week. And you guys know that I've been talking about my oldest turned 18 on Friday, which is great. We had I got to see, we celebrated his birthday on the 9th. We celebrated everything on the 9th. So on it, there's this movie that came out that he wanted to see, and I said, oh, we should go see it. And he's like, oh yeah, that'd be great. And he's like, oh, it's mommy's weekend. I'm like, dude, you're 18, So he actually asked, and you guys can tell, or can pretty much guess what's going to happen, right? Because it's all about maintaining the illusion of being an understanding and good parent. So of course, she said yes, which is great, right? And partly it's because I think this is probably the first time my son has ever actually asked to do something like this. So, when you get to that stage, to that point, there's a lot of mixed emotions on it, because it's been 5.5 years, and finally, the day after he turns 18, it happens, which is great. I mean, it's great, right? And it was awesome. I mean, it was a little surreal, because he and I generally don't get to go into town, because when all the kids are here, trying to leave certain people or certain kids, it's complicated. Normally my son just doesn't want to deal with it, so he'll stay home. My middle daughter always wants to go and wants to do solo trips. So if anyone else tries to go, then she gets angry. And then the youngest, is off and on. Sometimes she wants to go, sometimes she doesn't want to go. So this was the first time I had really an uninterrupted opportunity to just hang out with my son. And, it was cool. I picked him up. Unfortunately, to the movie theater is like an hour away. We live out in the middle of nowhere. So, so we drove the hour, got in, watched the movie, did a little bit of running around, just kind of hung out, and then dropped him off at his mom's, and it was... So my point is, on the mixed emotions, is it's tough, right? Because you're glad it's happened, and then you look back at it and you're like, are you kidding me? 5 years, right? And it's like, I guess it's a testament to the tenacity that these people have just to perpetuate these scenarios, right? And then it gets exacerbated because our children fall into it as well, and they are worried about their loyalties and how everything is going to get perceived and stuff. So they don't necessarily just jump in as well. Now, some people's kids are going to react differently. You know, some kids might see the shenanigans of it and be sick of it, and you know, hold the other parent accountable. I think for the most part, especially with a covert narc, that's not necessarily going to happen because they're so starved for attention that they're going to be very cautious about what they do or what they say and how they interact, because they don't want to anger or disappoint. Maybe anger is not the right word, because coverts don't necessarily, I mean, they do rage, but it's more emotional manipulation. It's more guilt trips and stuff like that. So they're looking for ways to mitigate that. So, and then we have to deal with it up to the point, you know, to where you get to like to where I am today, where I had this experience with him, and just wrapping your head around it, right? And I mean, and it's mixed emotions. You know, I'm happy that I was finally able to do it, and then at other times you look at it and it's like, man, you know, just the amount of time and frustration, and you can look at all the damage that's been done, all the damage that the other parent, because of their disorder, just the damage they leave in their wake. So the thing is, it's a gradual process, and there's many I like many small victories throughout this whole thing. And, you know, I talk about this a lot, where we just focusing on building the relationship with our kids so that we can make those micro little adjustments going forward to make things better. Now, my hope is as I'm able to start doing more stuff like this with him, then hopefully the other kids will start seeing that and start saying, hey, wait a minute, that sounds like a good idea as well. Now, it can completely go the other way. And, you know, if the other kids want to do stuff with their mom on certain days on my weekends, if I'm not doing anything, then I'm going to have to accommodate that. And I have in the past, right? And unfortunately, as I've mentioned in past videos, is I will do that. And then every time up until today, when I try to do something, then there's always a catch. There's always something, right? So, you know, the point of this video is just to say that, you know, it's not like going out and winning the war on the first day, right? This is a long, hard fought battle that we can persevere through. We can. It just takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of patience, and it takes a lot of perseverance on our side to deal with this stuff, to not react emotionally, which I know I talk about a lot, and just keep plugging along, just keep building, just keep slowly building that foundation. And when it slips, you just keep building it up, right? To be perfectly honest, I was surprised my son actually asked. I figured if he asked, she would say yes, but I wasn't sure if he would actually bring it up. And he did, so that was great. So, you know, it's just how things work out. So anyways, I guess the final thought I'll leave you with on this is that we have to focus on the positive of the situation, because it is so easy to focus on the negative. And, you know, it's tough, right? And you have to look at those little victories that you get and be able to grab onto those and just build onto those and spending your time in anger and frustration with what your ex is doing or how they're doing it or how they're complicating the situation doesn't help you, it doesn't help your children, and it doesn't help the entire situation. So, all right, so on that, I'm just going to wrap this video up. So I will talk to you guys in the next video. So, all right, take care. Bye.